Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. I move furniture for a living, which involves a lot of leg work, obviously, and I'm currently doing 75 to 125 push-ups and pull-ups a day. What do you think of that as far as training for muscle and overall health and fitness? I'm looking for the most bang for my buck. I enjoy the gym and working out, but don't love it. It really isn't leg work as we think of in the traditional sense, and I don't mean it's not going to help you with some strength and muscle, because it obviously will. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that your furniture moving really falls under, if you would classify it as training or exercise modalities, form of general physical preparedness. You would still benefit even from a health, longevity, bone density, insulin sensitivity, everything else. You would still benefit from dedicated leg training. As far as push-ups go, you can't really do enough push-ups to get big or strong. You just can't. The pull-ups, though, I mean, the amount of pull-ups you're doing is tremendous. And what I'm going to say off that, someone who's doing 75 plus pull-ups every day, that's going to help with your upper body a lot. Right? That's going to help with your upper body development tremendously. That's going to give you a lot of benefits. But here's what I would say. You still need to, even someone who has a physically active job, you still can glean enormous amounts of health benefits from doing actual real resistance training in a structured program that involves things like squats, that involves things like deadlifts. Now, granted, because you move furniture for a living, the deadlift might be one exercise that I might say, okay, this could be problematic, because you can't afford the lower back fatigue and soreness that might come with heavy deadlifting. So for someone like you, lighter deadlifting without a lot of volume, or doing power clean or something, is probably the sort of hip hinging you'd want to do. But as far as lower body goes, you probably still need to be squatting. You would benefit from squats in terms of your health, longevity, overall fitness, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think push-ups is really enough for overall chest and tricep and shoulder development. I think you need something else in there. I think you need to be doing benching or dips or something if you wanted, again, to get the most out of it. But your pull-ups themselves, great. The fact that you have a fairly physically demanding job and moving furniture for a living is pretty hard work. It's pretty tough manual labor. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to benefit from real strength training in those same muscles, because you still will. What I would say is that someone who has a job like yours probably needs less GPP work, right? You could probably get away with doing almost no general physical preparedness, right? You could get away with that because your physical activity and everything else is really high with your job. So what I would say is I would focus on pure strength. Someone in your position, I would focus on pure strength training, on squats, bench press, stuff like that, and I think you'll be fine. All right, next question. Is there a point progressing past the 315 bench and 225 overhead press for someone who is average height? The risk reward seems much higher now. Is it worth it? You know, I don't understand. What do you mean by worth it? Do you want to get stronger? If you want to get stronger, then do it. You're trying to gain muscle? Well, size and strength are correlated. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hit it, but if you're not happy with your size when your max is a 315 bench and a 225 overhead press, you probably do need to get stronger. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go heavier than that. You could build up to where you could do rep work with those. But as far as the risk versus reward, I don't understand. The risk as in you're going to have to put more training in? Or do you mean you're going to have to use more drugs? I don't really understand what you mean. There's no inherent risk to getting stronger. Now, what I will say to most people, an average height person who's not blasting a bunch of gear, those are serious, serious numbers. 315 legit bench, not a bounce bench, a legit bench, and a 225 overhead press. If you're doing these correctly and you're an average height guy, that's pretty impressive. For a drug-free person, that's phenomenal. So, I mean, if we were to look at it from an achievement perspective, well, there's probably not much need to go beyond that. In fact, for a lot of people, that's a lifetime type goal, right? That's a lifetime type goal. I know guys who are fairly genetically gifted, who are natural, who barely reach those numbers after a decade or more of training, right? So I guess that's maybe the thing is it's might be the time investment and the training involvement to get further beyond that, and having to do, you know, very serious training programming might be it. But I don't think it's like, if you mean an injury risk, no, not really. Training correctly and getting stronger with good fatigue management is not necessarily risky. So if that's what we're talking about, then no, it's not more risky. No risk to that. But what I would say that it might be too lofty of a goal for most people. But, you know, here's what I would also say. If you can get to a 225 press and a 315 bench as a natty, an average height, you've done well for yourself. Be proud of yourself. But, you know, you might as well go a little further. I mean, if you can reach that lofty goal, then why not see if you can get another 5 or 10 pounds or 20 or 25? Why not? Go ahead. I mean, if you love training, then go for it. Be exceptional. All right, next question. Leg curls before squats, bullshit or benefit? What would be the possible benefit? I've never heard of this sort of nonsense before. So I'm going to call bullshit. I don't know any champions. I don't know any champions with an amazing squat who do this silly shit. And it sounds almost like it's some sort of goofy bodybuilder, weird pre-exhaustion technique. Look, if you look at the research on pre-exhaustion has been shown in every study that's ever looked at it to produce inferior muscle growth. Right? Doing a small movement to make any muscle weaker before you do a bigger exercise doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you do this with a leg curl or a leg extension. Doesn't matter which side of the thigh you fatigue. Pre-exhaustion has been found to produce inferior training stimulus. You will gain less muscle from it. You will definitely gain less strength from it. So why would you intentionally do a training modality that has been shown conclusively, and we're just using common sense? I mean, if you just understand training at all, you shouldn't even need to study this. To know that pre-exhaustion is going to produce inferior results. Like, why would you specifically gain either less muscle or less strength or less of both? Why would you do that? Because realistically, if you make any muscle more fatigued before you do a big exercise, it's going to reduce your workload. Now, there are cases where reducing workload can create tension because you've made an exercise more difficult. But here's what I would say. Why wouldn't you just do a more difficult exercise? In other words, maybe you're saying, okay, well, maybe I want to get more hamstring development out of my squat, and I want less axial loading. There's easier ways to do that. Let's say you wanted to make your squat, I don't know, more posterior chain dominant and slightly reduce axial loading with a lighter weight. Well, you could do a box squat, right? You can pick a different exercise to achieve your desired result, because that sounds to me like that's what you would be doing. That's what you're trying to do. Because obviously it's not going to make your quads get more stimulated. They're going to be less stimulated because you're going to be forced to use a lighter weight because its dynamic stabilizer has been weakened. So you're going to be forced to use a lighter weight. So things like the quads would obviously be worked less. So the only possible motive I can think of why someone would do some silly shit like this would be because they want to get more hamstring involvement in their squat. Like they want more hamstring development out of it. I don't know. But you could do a box squat and achieve that. Right? And what would it do? You'd have to use slightly less weight. Most people box squat to depth. We're not talking about a high box. On a high box, you might be able to do 100 more pounds. But an actual box squat to parallel or an inch below parallel, like a low box, you're going to reduce the weight 10 to 15% versus your normal squat. So you're going to get a little less axial loading and potentially maybe a hair more hamstring. So that's what you would do in that case. But couldn't we argue that if you wanted more hamstring development from a big movement, couldn't you just do a deadlift or a hip hinge? That would actually work even better, wouldn't it? Then you're only doing one movement and you're getting good overall development. So people come up with these silly ideas with this stuff, you know, silly ideas based on nothing. This is the weird sort of goofy shit that bodybuilders come up with. And that if they weren't blasting grams and grams of gear, these guys would be tiny. Because when bodybuilders do silly shit like this and actually still get big, that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? Drugs work whether you train or not. That is a proven fact in multiple studies, peer-reviewed studies. You gain muscle on drugs even if you don't even lift. Proof of stuff like this is further proof of that. And jackasses who are getting big doing silly shit like this all the time, you know it's all drugs. It's all drugs. Because this is going to cause less muscle growth. And it's going to definitely cause less strength. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. And I will talk to you guys next time in part 3.